number you have dialed is not in service at this time.
Welcome to Spotlight on the Arts. I'm Patrick Cristiano, your host, the publisher of TheaterLife.com, a website for theater buffs in New York City and the Hamptons. And we cover Broadway and off-Broadway theater and stuff related to theater, too. I'm coming to you from the LTV studio, and I have a really special guest today, an old friend of mine, Maria Bacardi. Welcome, Maria. Maria is a performer, an artist, an actress, an entrepreneur. She's one of the coolest people I know.
Oh.
Thank you, Maria.
Patrick. Thank you for having me. It's
so
always so nice to see you.
It's always nice to see
always,
you.
Always.
Yeah.
It's a joy.
We've known each other, since 1991, so...
Well, what is that, 30-some years?
Not yet, not quite. That's 18.
Okay, so 18 to 21, right.
Yeah.
Almost, 25 plus.
Yeah.
And it's always been a pleasure to see you.
Yeah. So Maria she's made some new albums. We're going to try and talk a little bit about her process, but you have two albums, right?
Yes, I have two albums. The first one is called Deseo, which means desire, and we did it a few years ago. And it's about... it's mostly traditional Cuban music.
I don't want to start there.
Okay.
So let's not. I mean, even though you have two albums, I want to save them for the end. I want to talk about your show at Joe's Pub and your process a little bit first. Is that okay?
Okay, sure.
So she has two albums. So tell me the names.
Deseo and Duele.
Duele, yes, which is her latest album. We're going to play some music, a little bit clip from her later on. But she also just recently performed at Joe's Pub. And these are Cuban songs that you're doing.
These are Cuban songs. Some of them translated into English. I translated them. They had never been translated before.
And so she recently had a show at Joe's Pub, and she's going to be doing a show at Guildhall this summer, July 14th, which is a Sunday, at 8 o'clock. But we're going to talk...
And the tickets are available now.
Available.
So
you go
please get your tickets.
Guildhall.org is how you find tickets, and go to the July 14th and you can find them. But what I want to talk about with Maria is her process, how she came full circle to doing this. Because I know Maria for, like we just said, close to 30 years. And when I first knew you were Oddfellows Playhouse.
Right.
And you did a show at Guildhall called, what was it called again?
Well, amongst the many
but the one
pieces
that I
of work. Well, you saw many different ones.
Okay, I did.
But one of the full sort of theater shows that was presented at Guildhall was 1,000 Avant-Garde Plays.
Fabulous.
By our Kenneth Koch, who died in the process of our doing it. It was a very special piece of a collection of plays that were less than 1 minute long.
And it was astounding how so much could happen in a minute.
Yes. He would say that he would search the TV, and he could get the gist of the program or the story in less than a minute. And that's what he wrote about. There were not 1,000, but there were many.
Right.
And I chose the humorous ones, and the ones about love. And he had many political ones because he wrote them in the 60s. But I chose the ones that talked of love and the ones that were very funny.
Well, it was a wonderful evening, and I remember it very well. And but I had forgotten about it until we came together and started talking before we came into the studio.
It was a real privilege to do that.
Yeah, and one of the things that stood out, even how long that was, what year? Do you have any idea?
Oh my goodness, what was it? Almost 10 years ago. Is it possible?
I think it's longer.
Longer than that, you think? It feels like yesterday.
I know everything does.
Yeah, they were so fresh.
The reason I think it was longer because it was when I first started writing the theater criticism for Dance Paper, and
so then you have a better memory than me.
Well, only just for that reason, because
God, it feels like it was yesterday.
But what I remember about it was the lighting was so special.
The lighting by Cameron Steele.
I'd never seen Guildhall lit so well.
Oh, it was so beautiful. It was so beautiful, and the actors were so delightful, and we were able to get those squares that changed scenes and spaces. So it worked out really well.
So was this a culmination project with Oddfellows, or did you do how did Oddfellows start? What was the inspiration to create it?
Well, I moved here to East Hampton in '91. I'd been living in the city since '77. Moved from Spain to the city, and had done a lot of off Broadway and performances. And when I moved here, I thought, well, what am I going to do?
Maria's a fabulous actress.
Thank you. How am I going to continue my acting work? And I was interested in doing innovative work. I've always liked to do things that challenge me and that haven't been done before. And so I decided to create a small theater company with a lot of the artists that were here already, whether they were painters, poets, musicians, set designers, writers, all sorts of different kinds of artists. And we basically would get together and decide on a theme that was important for us, and then gather different materials. So it wasn't really written as in theater. It was more composed and choreographed, depending on the materials that we were interested in discussing and developing. And we worked for many years, many summers, mainly the summers, sometimes in the wintertime as well. And with different people that came in, came out, elder people, babies, children. Basically, it was an open space for all of us to be able to.
How lovely.
It was wonderful. It was wonderful. It was a fraternity of people out here. When we still didn't have the capacity of all these arts, Bay Street wasn't yet opened. We did have Guildhall, but it wasn't really focusing on the theater so much. And then the Thousand Avant-Garde Plays was not a culmination, because we continued, of course.
Right.
And we continued as mainly a site-specific theater ensemble.
Right, so and then you started doing things at Longhouse?
We started doing commissions at Longhouse for their benefits. When Robert Wilson opened up the Watermill Center, I was very, very quick to tell him that I wanted my company to be a finger in the hand of Watermill.
How cool.
And he said, come, and you're welcome, and here we are. And so it was my second family, Watermill. It still is. I helped build it brick by brick, and we did a lot of work there. We did a lot of showcases of our work there. And I continue very close to them. I don't do so much of the theater work anymore, but very close to them in different capacities.
I remember another piece you did in Southampton about
at Karen Mannix's gallery.
Yes.
It was called The Lost Lesson, and it was about Hildegard Rodriguez Carballera, who was a historical figure, a young woman in the during the Spanish First Republic, I believe. And she was a young woman who had been eugenically conceived by her mother with a priest, we think, or maybe a military, but she chose the man who she thought was most intelligent. So she created this child and decided to homeschool her. And she became, at 16 years old, she finished her college degree in law, and she worked as the secretary of the Socialist Party at the age of 16, 17. And she started getting very curious about the English, the Planned Parenthood movement that was just starting, and the English intellectuals as well, H.C. Wells, etc. And when she became 18 and she wanted to sort of leave her mother's nest, her mother guarded her fiercely. Her mother decided that, I made you, I can unmake you. And she
You're refreshing my memory at the same time.
She shot her. She shot this child, this 18-year-old young woman. She shot her to death. and then went to the police and said, yes, I did this. And then they put her in a insane asylum. And then when the Spanish Civil War burst, apparently the people in the insane asylum were able to escape, and she escaped, and nobody ever found out whatever happened to her. But this young woman is sort of obscure. I grew up in Spain, and I never heard about her until I don't know how I came about her knowing her, but I was fascinated. So
it's a fascinating story.
Right. We wrote the piece.
So you wrote the piece?
Yes,
with
my colleagues. Miss Musi, the other writer. And again, Cameron Steele did the lights in the box, and then the idea was to be in one of the boxes. Like
the concept was so inventive, and
right,
and you played it so beautiful. I could still see you in this little box, and I still remember the physical life of you being so confined.
Right, the top was sort of like the serious academic girl that she was, and then the bottom was the liberation of women, and my focus on it was celebrating women's pleasure. So that was, and it was called The Lost Lesson because we thought about her leaving a letter to H.C. Wells saying, I think my mother's going to kill me. That's why I'm writing to you. You're like a father to me.
Whoa.
And I won't be able to tell this lesson to my children because I won't have any, but please, I entrust you to tell the young people of my story, and how, especially women, and how we are oppressed, and we have the chance and we have to catch it to become equal than men. And that was 1935.
She was way ahead of her time.
Way ahead of her time.
Way ahead of her time.
Yeah.
That was a really interesting piece. And you also, you have a studio on your where you live, and it's I've been there. It's really cool.
It's a beautiful studio.
Over the years, you've done these boxes. Can you tell? I wish we'd had some pictures of those.
On my website.
What's your website?
www.mariabacardi.com.
Maria has these incredible boxes. They're environments.
They're little environments. I see them as scenes of plays of my life. Yes, scenes. And I started in New York in sort of in the corner of the studio I lived in. So I started with tiny little medical vials. And that was, each one of them was a scene. And then when I came here, I had more space, so I was able to find old boxes in the barns, and I would always be looking for old pieces that were interesting, and filling them up. I finally spoke about them.
Walk us through your process of creating one. Like, you get an idea. Do you know what you're going to?
Well, I've been collecting small objects forever, since I was a kid. It started really when I was a very young child, and my grandmother took me to a very musty old museum of natural history that we had in Spain, in Madrid, in the 1963, 4, 5. And Spain was at that time not very far behind the Spanish Civil War. Everything was sort of poor and run down, and there were these, how do you call them, panoramas, with small specimens of the Spanish lynx and the Spanish squirrel, but they were all like, they didn't have their hair. They were very haunting. And also at the same time, I thought I couldn't draw as a child. So I thought it was much easier at that point to take some of the toys that I had and put them in the shoe boxes of my mother. I would paint the shoe boxes. I was a young kid. And then I would say, well, it's easier to put a little horse that I have in it, and then maybe a little, we had a dollhouse, and I would put, things inside. And when I arrived to the United States in 1977, I was barely 18, somebody said, oh, your boxes look like Joseph Cornell. And I said, who's Joseph Cornell? And I looked up who Joseph Cornell was, and I said, my goodness, I wish they were as beautiful as Joseph Cornell's, but I didn't have any art knowledge. I had never
Right.
gone to college yet.
Right, and you hadn't studied
So it
art.
was really, I didn't have any influence. It was just affinity.
So now, when you start to make a box today, like 5 years ago or 10 years ago, when you would start a box, would you start with the concept, or you would just
Yes,
find the object?
yes.
I mean, so
Well,
like,
I would start with the concept. Sometimes the gallery had a theme, red and black, etc. So I would. I'd make maybe 12, 15 boxes on that theme, and I would paint them and use different objects which would hopefully have a conversation with each other, a dialectic. And sometimes also the boxes were in conjunction with the performance pieces that we were doing.
okay.
So they were an added piece of vocabulary to the theater work. And you know, you sit there for hours until this speaks to that, and that color speaks to that color, and then there's the twine, and then sometimes there's a...
Do you know where you're going, or does it happen in the process?
No, I don't know where I'm going at all.
Okay, that's what I
I
thought.
make them, I live with them for a little while. I come back, I change something. It has to be millimeter. You know, the distance has to be just right.
Right.
Sometimes I say, no, I don't like this, it's too busy. Put it aside, take it back again, and start also depuring it so that there's one breath uninterrupted from one side to the next.
They're wonderful. I love
Thank
your
you.
boxes. We have about 10 minutes left, and I want to kind of transition to talking about your evolution into singing these Cuban songs that you're doing in the 2 albums that you've created. One has been released, and one's coming out.
Right.
And the show that you did at Joe's Pub, and the one that's coming up. So you're going to have to help me, because I know I'm going to. But the new album is Duel. I can say
Duele.
Duele.
Duele, which
Duele.
means it hurts.
And what are some of the songs on it?
It hurts to be alive, and it hurts to be Cuban. Some of the songs, most of the songs are, like in my first album, traditional songs that were written, like the songs of your Irving Berlins and Duke Ellingtons. The Cuban cultural musical language is so rich. There's so many different genres. The genres that I gravitate to are the very romantic songs that are called boleros, which you're supposed to dance with your partner on a piece of tile. So very close and almost without moving, but of course you move to the rhythm. And these boleros were invented in end of the 18th century, beginning of 19th century. So I choose all these different songs. Some of them are close to 100 years old. And my endeavor in this second album called Duele is to get away from the traditional sort of vintagey, facile image that we have developed about Cuba, the 1950s cars and the white suit and the cigar and all that, and bring them into with a musical cushion that is very contemporary to sort of re-energize them so that the young generation, global generations, can hear these songs. And yes, they're Cuban songs to those who know it, but they're really just music. And I teamed up with David Oquendo, who is an encyclopedia of these songs.
wow,
They come out of his ears. And he's a fantastic guitarist.
That's really exciting, isn't it?
And then this young man from Cuba who just arrived a couple of years ago, and who by chance was hoping, because boleros were banned in Cuba for many years, because they were considered, after the revolution, they were considered too anecdotal and too bourgeois. So this whole generation of Cubans never heard these songs. And this young man, Edgardo, productor en jefe, we call him, he calls himself, he is a rap artist from Cuba and a producer and a spinner. And he said to me, just fresh out of Cuba, we just met, a friend introduced us, and he said, I'm really interested in the boleros. And I said, my God, I'm very interested in making the boleros accessible to a young audience. So Duele is the the child that we've
Oh,
conceived.
wow, how cool.
And hopefully young people can really, we can play it in lounges, and also it's good music to dance because it's got a real sort of groovy beat.
And you did some of these at Joe's Pub too?
Yes, we did. What many songs? Like 13 songs we did at Joe's Pub, and it was great. It was great. It was great. We didn't launch it there because we're launching this CD on May 24th.
Okay.
This May 24th. And then so it was
people
a sort
can
of
find
pre-launch.
it. Where would they find it?
Well, on all the social media platforms, Spotify and Amazon.
We have a clip of you singing a song. Is this on the new album?
Yes.
So let's run the. I know we've skipped some of the pictures. We're going to pick them up in a second. So let's run the clip, but we only going to show 20 seconds. It's really just a tease here.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Even though you have discarded and you've abandoned me,
Maria, I forgot to give you the name, and set it up for me. Give me the name.
Yes, the name is Lágrimas Negras,
which means
black tears, which is
Yes.
a very, very famous Cuban song written by Miguel Matamoros in the 30s. But this is a novel version because it's written in English, translated by me, and it translates to black pearls. I cry black tears like black pearls.
Oh, how beautiful!
It's a song about love and forgiveness.
And which is part of the process of getting to the other side.
I suppose. That's a whole other topic, forgiveness.
That I know. Now you did an album before this too.
Yes, the first album called Deseo, which means desire, was much more traditional, like the songs that my mother used to sing when we left Cuba. She was able to take her guitar and some musical instruments. She was very musical, my mother. And they would meet, I was just a little kid in pajamas, listening. I was supposed to be in bed, but I wasn't. I was listening to my mother, and all the Cuban exiles that were in Spain, in cold Madrid, they would all come on the weekends and sit and drink rum and cry and sing and cry and sing until all hours of the morning. So I never learned these songs like, oh, I'm going to learn the song. I just heard them so many times and didn't think of it. But when my mother had a tracheotomy and she couldn't speak anymore, she couldn't sing, obviously, and then sort of in parallel, without thinking of it, I had always liked to sing, but I had never really put it out there. And I thought, well, let me put it out there, see if it floats. And it's sort of become a little sailboat.
So when did that evolution start?
Well, maybe 4 or 5 years ago.
So you've done a lot in 4 or 5 years that
Yes.
you started doing this. Yeah,
Yes.
That's really...
Yes, my next project that I'm working on, which will hopefully happen, is the American Songbook translated in French. So songs like Misty, songs like Those Foolish Things, all those beautiful American songs, but translated into French. So we're in the process of
So you speak
hopefully
French
doing
too?
that. Yes.
Oh, how lovely.
Yes.
So, we have, let's show the pictures of her. We have a couple of pictures of the evolution. Let's start with number one. And this is you.
At the Longhouse.
This is Longhouse, which we talked about earlier.
Yes,
that you do
Jack
things
Larson
there.
has always been so supportive of us.
He's a terrific guy.
Yes.
And this is...
This is at the Gitano, the jazz club. This was the launching of Deseo.
Which I don't know this jazz club.
No, yes, it's in the Gitano Hotel. It's
Okay.
a Japanese-run jazz club. You know, Japanese love jazz.
Yeah, and then this is the
This is Cementerio de Novias, which is a very cheesy song that is has a very sassy musical background, which we have done, and it's funny song about it's cemetery of ex-girlfriends. So she's talking to her boyfriend and saying, "I will sit here and wait for the ex-girlfriends to come so that we can wring your neck." So that's not about forgiveness.
but which album is this on?
This is Duele.
It's
This
on
is
Duele
the one
too.
coming,
It's on Duele too.
coming up.
Okay.
Yeah,
But,
yeah.
but this was a single that you released. This is a cover
Right.
for this single. And we have
Yes,
one
and
more. We have some.
You can
couple-
find that on YouTube, and then we have Lágrimas Negras.
Okay, oh, that's what they have up here. Okay.
That's Lágrimas Negras, and the artwork is created by a Cuban artist in Cuba.
I like it. I like it a lot. And this is you performing at Joe's Pub. So here we have a
There we
have
go.
A little.
There we go. There we go. The end of a song, probably.
Wonderful. So the date at Guildhall is July 14th, Sunday at 8 o'clock.
8 o'clock,
And
yeah.
have you put your song list together yet? Or are you still working on it?
No, we have the song list. We know which one comes first and second and third.
Do you want to share anything with us? You want to save it?
No, I'll save it.
Okay.
You have to come. You have to come, and you have to listen and enjoy these jewels of Cuban music brought to the 21st century.
Will you have the same group that you had at
12 people, yes.
Because
I have
they were-
terrific,
they-
terrific.
they-
My musicians are amazing. And yes, we're all going to be there together. So it should be a fun night. Please come.
Yeah. Maria, thank you so much for coming to
Thank
do
you,
this. And
Patrick.
we'll come back and talk maybe a little bit more about how you're start into music and you get more detailed about
Right.
the process that you do and everything that goes into bringing a show like this to Guildhall.
Great. Thank you, Patrick.
Thank you so much.
Yes, looking
Maria.
forward.